Welcome back, everyone. First of all, if the audio and video both are fine, please let me know. Please give me a thumbs up. Good. So let's begin. So we discussed about coal and petroleum until now, and this is where we are beginning from. We are going to discuss some of the other sources of energy which can be called as non-renewable, but these are non-renewable and non-conventional sources. Until now, what we have discussed, they were non-renewable and conventional sources. Now, looking at shale first. Now, when it comes to shale gas is a kind of natural gas which we are extracting from shale rocks. All right, natural gas extracted from shale rocks, largely having methane. Largely having methane. Now, in case of shale, something like this is what we see, that first we have to dig a horizontal well. We have to go to the level of shale rocks. This black colored region that you see, this is the layer of shale rocks, and first we have to dig a well to this shale rocks, and then we do horizontal drilling. All right, we do a horizontal drilling in it, and then we apply huge amount of hydraulic pressure meaning that water at very high pressure is sent through this well, and now what it does it that it produces cracks. It would produce cracks in this layer of rocks, and from these cracks the gases will be taken away. So in this manner, what we see is that these gases which are being released from here, they will be collected back, and then they can be used. So they are very similar in composition to natural gas, and that's why they have methane as their primary constituent. Now, in this particular scenario, when it comes to shale gas for the first time, shale gas is not a old source. It's not that we have known about it for a very long time, but when shale gas was first discovered, and it was largely in the US when the shale gas reserves were discovered. When we discovered these resources of shale, this is what completely changed the entire energy scenario for the US. Just imagine this, that before they found shale, before US found shale, they used to be a net importer of energy. Right, they used to be a net importer of energy, and with shale they became a net exporter of energy. So they found so much of sources in shale that now they could export energy. They now had extra energy, and until now, before shale, they were deficient in energy. So that's how the entire scenario changed for the US. And then you can say a natural justice was done, and Russia also found shale, and then China also found shale. And these all countries, they found good resources of shale uh, inside the earth's crust. So in a manner, you can say that all these then became the leading nations with shale resources. Now, overall, when it comes to shale resources in India, there are certain locations, there are certain areas where we have found shale presence in India also. And this is where we are talking about all these areas marked. So the areas which are marked in purple, these are the areas where we have found proven sources of shale. That these are the areas where we do have shale, and all the other areas in orange, these are the areas where we have found potential, we have found prospective of shale presence. So that's why these are all the areas where India also has shale presence. And this map basically was published by ONGC. Now, ONGC has been doing a lot of research in shale with regards to India, and 2010-11 onwards, they had started all the research in shale. Almost for 10 years, they did all the research, and 2021 they had submitted their report on shale. And this is where they said that although India does have shale, but the shale resources that we have in India, they cannot be seen as the primary source of energy. They are not as good a source or as big a source as countries like US or Russia, etc. have. So then they said that we cannot think of shale as an additional resource. We cannot think of it as the primary resource for us, but maybe as an additional resource we can. But overall, majority of the many of the resources that we have found, they're not commercially viable for us. They're not commercially usable for us. This is basically what they had said. So, but these are the areas where India also has found shale resources. Now, overall, when it comes to shale extraction, we also have to understand that there are certain issues associated with shale extraction as well. For example, it increases the consumption of fresh water, increased consumption of fresh water. So now, in case of consumption of fresh water, what happens is that we know that fresh water will be used for providing that hydraulic pressure. What we discussed as hydraulic pressure, we see that we make the use of fresh water for that. So consumption of fresh water increases. Also, we mix some chemicals with it. Now, then you cannot say that that water is usable anymore, it is not drinkable anymore, so that also becomes a challenge. And overall, apart from that, that's why it can also lead to ground and surface water contamination. It can lead to water contamination. This water with chemical additives can mix with surface water, with groundwater, and increase the toxicity of that water also. Then it also can lead to induced seismicity. Induced seismicity. Now, seismicity mainly basically talking about earthquakes, that it can induce earthquake. Now, why are we saying this? Because you have a layer of rock and you are trying to extract gases out of it. It can produce some kind of instability in these areas, and hence it can also lead to seismicity induced from these areas. And then there are also local impacts that we have to think of, that all of a sudden, let's say a government gets or finds a new source of shale or any energy resource for that matter, they are going to get to it, they are going to extract as much as possible. Now, this is also where some issues can be seen. The issues are in the sense that for the people who have been living there for a very long time, it becomes very problematic that all of a sudden there will be movements, a lot of transportations will happen, machinery will come in, pollution levels can increase. So for them, there will be a local impact. They might have been living peacefully until now, and this all of a sudden creates a new situation for them. So there are all these issues that we have with shale gas extraction. After this, we have something called as coal bed methane. Now, again, coal bed methane also has been in the news because India now is also looking towards coal bed methane extraction and trying. We are going to spend more, we are going to invest more in coal bed methane. Now, what is coal bed methane? This is nothing but methane that we find in the coal areas. Wherever you have our coal reserves, near those areas, we might also find pockets of methane, and that will be called as coal bed methane. Now, this coal bed methane extraction as a process is much easier as compared to shale extraction, because coal beds are far near the surface of the earth as compared to petroleum, or let's say as compared to shale. So that's why getting coal bed methane is much easier, that there is a that we dig until this layer, and we will be able to get from there on. So we'll be able to extract methane from there, and it can also become a very important non-conventional source of energy. Overall, when you look at India's map, all these areas which are marked in yellow, the areas that are marked in yellow, these are the areas where we have found coal bed methane. And as you can see that wherever we have our coal fields, coal bed methane areas are also pretty much there in those areas itself. So coal bed methane, again, now the government is starting to promote it, it's starting to spend on it, invest in it, and going forward we'll see that this will become one of the sources of getting unconventional source of methane. Now, when it comes to another such small topic, and this is about methane hydrate. Now, in case of methane hydrate, this is nothing but a crystalline form of methane and water. Wherever you see this term hydrate, just remember that hydrate is nothing but water or water molecules. So wherever you have any crystalline compound where you have water molecules present, you can say that it's nothing but hydrate. Now, when it comes to hydrates, it doesn't mean that if you have a hydrate, it should be liquid in its nature. It is a crystalline form. There are, okay, from your daily examples, from your household examples, there is a hydrate that we all have been using. Can you tell me which is that hydrate? I'm very sure that most of you have, or rather all of you have probably used it. Yes, Lakshmi, you have given the correct answer. Hemlata, you have given the correct answer. See, salt would not count here. Sodium chloride would not count here because it is high. It is a crystalline form, but hydrate molecules may or may not be present in it. So most common example, yeah, Aniket, you are also correct, is your washing powder. Washing powder is a hydrate structure. All right. So just remember that hydrate does not necessarily mean that it will be liquidy or it will be in liquid form as such. No, it can have its crystalline form. So similarly, in this case, we are talking about methane hydrate, where methane and water molecules are mixed together in crystalline solid form. So this is how methane hydrates actually can be extracted. Now, when it comes to methane hydrates, we see that all these areas are across the world, the continental margins, the deep water seas and inland lakes, etc., the Arctic areas, the Antarctic areas, these are the areas where methane hydrates can be found. So if you see this, sediments and sedimentary rock units below Arctic permafrost, sedimentary deposits along continental margins, deep water sediments of inland lakes and seas, and under the Antarctic ice. So that's why Arctic and the Antarctic areas, the continental margins, and the deep water seas and uh, ocean beds and lake beds. So these are the areas where we have found methane hydrates. Now, in case of methane hydrates, there is one thing that is very, very important as a concept, and there is already a question that they have asked on it. So I just want you to read this question. Which of the following statements are correct about the deposits of methane hydrate? Just go through the question and I'll also launch the poll for you. I know that we have not discussed it yet, but I'll discuss a very important concept through this question. Let me also launch a poll for you. Please mark your answers. Hmm. So 45% of you have marked D, which actually is the correct answer, and the rest of you, some of you have marked A, B, and C. Let me just discuss this with you. Which of the following statements are correct about the deposits of methane hydrate? One, global warming might trigger the release of methane gas from these deposits. Now, this is the correct statement. Why? Because what we know is that a lot of methane hydrate and a lot of methane actually is buried under the layer of ice. For example, when you take the polar ice caps in the Arctic and the Antarctic areas, there is a thick deposit of ice, and under this layer of ice, you have methane deposits. Now, with global warming, what's happening, we all are aware of it, that polar ice caps have been melting. And because of melting of the polar ice caps, the thick layer of ice that was present above methane, that now has been decreasing. And as it decreases, methane comes to the surface, and this methane can just go and mix with the atmosphere. So that's why it might trigger the release of methane gas from these deposits, which is correct. And this is why it becomes very dangerous, because methane is a greenhouse gas. And not only the fact that methane is a greenhouse gas, methane as a greenhouse gas is far more dangerous than carbon dioxide. Now, with carbon dioxide, the thing is that the volume in which carbon dioxide is being released today is huge. The emission levels are huge. And because of that, methane is not that we discuss all the time. But if, let's say, you had 1 kg of methane and 1 kg of carbon dioxide, then 1 kg of methane will be far more dangerous for our earth as compared to carbon dioxide. So that's why now what's happening, that methane is a greenhouse gas, you are emitting it into the atmosphere. It means that greenhouse gases, or the emission of these greenhouse gases, is leading to more of greenhouse gas emission. Just imagine this, that, sorry, more of greenhouse effect, more of global warming. So global warming is causing more of global warming because of that. So that is where the issue is, that global warming is accelerating global warming because of the release of all these methane gases, etc. Second statement is large deposits of methane hydrate are found in Arctic tundra and under the seafloor. This is correct. We discussed about this, that sea bottoms, lake bottoms, ocean bottoms, continental margins, Arctic areas, Antarctic areas. These are the ways, these are the areas where you find them. So large deposits of methane hydrates found in Arctic tundra and under the seafloor is also correct. Third statement is methane in the atmosphere oxidizes to carbon dioxide after a decade or two. Now, even this is a correct answer. This is a correct statement. What happens is that in case of methane, it will combine with the oxygen in the atmosphere and convert to carbon dioxide and moisture. If you are also someone who cannot live without balancing the equations, then do this. So what is happening here is that methane in the atmosphere is combining with oxygen, and it is leading to formation of carbon dioxide. Now, this is something that does not really happen quickly. It's not that methane will go in the atmosphere and it will convert into carbon dioxide. Methane is very stable, very inert in that sense, and that's why it takes a long time before conditions will be suitable for methane to convert into carbon dioxide by mixing with oxygen, combining with oxygen in the atmosphere. It takes at least 8 to 12 years. It can take up to 8 to 12 years for this to even begin. So that's why we are saying that this will happen ultimately. And that's why, yes, first for almost 10 years it will remain as methane, and then later on it converts into carbon dioxide and remains there in the atmosphere for a very, very long time. So that's why all these three statements, they are all correct. Now, one again very, very important news source has been hydrogen enriched CNG, or hydrogen enriched compressed natural gas. Now, just remember that whenever and wherever you come across the term natural gas, the meaning of natural gas is primarily methane. All right, it is primarily methane. So you can easily say that up to 85% in the composition, all right, up to 85% in the composition is nothing but methane. 85%, all right, up to 85% is nothing but methane. Now, in wherever you see natural gas, so just remember this term, natural gas. Wherever you see natural gas, just think that we are talking about methane. Now, in case of HCNG, we are saying that this is hydrogen enriched CNG, meaning that in CNG now we have mixed hydrogen to it. So now when it comes to hydrogen, hydrogen becomes very crucial. Today, you know how much of emphasis India is also putting in hydrogen. The world is trying to uh, see how to use hydrogen. We have the green hydrogen mission now, where we are looking at various different industries where hydrogen can play a big role. So why hydrogen? What's so important, what's so special about hydrogen? Can you tell me first, and then I will tell you the points. Yeah, Gula, you are correct, it is clearer. So let me write this. Hydrogen is clean because no carbon dioxide. Hydrogen has no carbon, so no carbon dioxide emission. So that's why it's a very clean fuel. So this is correct. Yeah, Veera, you are correct. Shalu, you are correct. So this is about it being very efficient. So it has high efficiency. What else? There is one more point that I want. At least one more point that I want. Okay, let's waste Shalu. This also is a correct point, but not what I was looking for. But yes, it's also correct. Shilpa, you are along the correct lines. So this is basically about abundance. Hydrogen is abundant. Hydrogen is available through water, through petroleum, through any hydrocarbon in elemental form. Or, for example, when you look at the composition of the earth, hydrogen is the 10th most abundant element in the earth. So that's why it is among the top 10. Plus, in compound form, it is just available everywhere. And with very little hydrogen, we can get a lot of energy. Just think of nuclear fusion. We'll discuss about nuclear fusion later. But sun basically uses nuclear fusion. So just imagine the kind of energy that sun produces with hydrogen. So that's why hydrogen is very efficient, is a clean source of fuel, and it is very easily abundant uh, inside the earth, on the earth. So that's why hydrogen becomes so important, and that's why we have been trying so much that we should be able to use hydrogen in one way or the other, whether using it as a part of fuel cell, whether directly using it as fuel, whether in various different industries like fertilizer industry, iron and steel plants, all these areas, we see that hydrogen can play a big role. And here we are trying to mix hydrogen with CNG. So the advantages that we get is it reduces the emission of carbon monoxide, so less carbon monoxide, enables fuel savings, obviously because it is more efficient because of hydrogen presence. Engines can be calibrated to lower the amounts of nitrogen oxides as well. So again, we see that because hydrogen is taking up a proportion, that also decreases the amount of nitrogen oxides. Engines need minimum modification to run on HCNG. This is also very, very important because otherwise it would become a nightmare for us to even think of using HCNG. But the good thing is that if the engines can work on CNG, they would work on HCNG also. So very little modification is required to make the engines work with HCNG. So that's why it becomes very crucial. Then also ideal fuel for high load applications and heavy duty vehicles. Now this is where it will be useful in buses and trucks also. Now this was not the case with CNG. Using buses or trucks with CNG becomes difficult because it does not generate as much power as HCNG will be able to, and hence it is actually a fuel that can be used in heavy duty vehicles as well. So overall, that's why we see that performance is also better, efficiency is also better. So there are all these advantages largely being added because of presence of hydrogen, right? So that's why there are all these things. There are although some problems, some issues that we do see, that for example, determining the most optimized ratio of hydrogen to natural gas is difficult. Now it's not that we have not used it. We have used. I mean, Government of India also, for example, has used HCNG in the past as a pilot program. It was run in the Delhi buses, but we still do not know what exactly should be the best optimized ratio of hydrogen to natural gas. So that is one problem. Then it requires new infrastructure for preparing HCNG. HCNG manufacturing plants will have to be brought up, and then we'll have to invest a lot on that. So infrastructural cost altogether will be very, very high if we are trying to scale up this entire industry. Then commercialization is not going to be easy. There are a lot of things that you need to do. First, you have to make it available. Manufacturing has to be done. Gas stations have to be put in. There are a lot of things that you'll have to do before we can think of commercializing it. And then lastly, one major problem that the entire world anyway has been facing, that the current cost of hydrogen itself is high. Cost of getting or manufacturing hydrogen is high. So that's why HCNG cost will be high. So normal CNG will be at lower cost, HCNG will be at a higher cost, because again, because of presence of hydrogen. So that's why there are all these shortcomings. We have all these problems that we currently have with HCNG. One question actually has come from here also. Just to read the question, I'll launch the poll for you. I'm launching the poll. Please mark your answers. Hmm. So I see a mix: 31% A, 35% B, 2% C, and 33% D. So almost equally divided. It was an easy question. I'll tell you how it becomes easy. Because at least D should not have been marked. Anyway, let me tell you. In the context of proposals to the use of hydrogen enriched CNG, HCNG as fuel for buses in public transport, consider the following statements. First is, the main advantage of use of HCNG is the elimination of carbon monoxide emissions. The word here is elimination. Elimination means what? Completely reducing it, I mean completely making it zero. But did we say that? Let me just go back. What did we say? Reduction. It reduces the emission of carbon monoxide. It does not eliminate it. Because just think of it with a simple logic. If you have CNG, CNG is natural gas, compressed natural gas. What is natural gas? Methane. Does methane have carbon? Answer is yes. So as long as you are using methane, carbon monoxide emission will happen, but it will be reduced almost by 40% reduction in carbon monoxide happens when we use HCNG. So it's not elimination, it is reduction. So this is a wrong statement. So A cannot be your answer and D cannot be your answer. So either the answer is 2 and 3 only, or the answer is 4 only. So let us look at 4. What does 4 say? HCNG makes the fuel less expensive than CNG. How is that possible? We just discussed about this, that hydrogen is costly. Hydrogen is costly. Hydrogen is expensive. Manufacturing hydrogen is not that easy. If hydrogen manufacturing was cheap and easy, we would have been using hydrogen everywhere. But are we doing that? We are not. Why? Because hydrogen production and manufacturing is costly. So that's why hydrogen, when you have hydrogen in CNG, it makes the fuel more expensive than CNG. So that's why 4 is wrong. So 4 is wrong. So then we are left with only 2 and 3. HCNG as fuel reduces carbon dioxide and hydrocarbon emission. Yes, this is correct. Reduces. Hydrogen up to 1/5 by volume can be blended with CNG as fuel for buses. Now, this is a difficult statement because it's a factual statement. Whether you know the fact or not will matter. But fortunately, to answer this question, statement number 3 is not required. Without even reading statement number 3, we already know that this is a correct statement. So that's why it was an easy question. I did not expect so many of you to mark D. So you have to be a bit more attentive. I don't know whether it is because of the post lunch session or what it is, but more correct answers were required here. Now we move on to renewable energy, but before that, if you have any questions, please let me know. Any questions if you have, from shale gas, from cool bed methane, or from hydrogen enriched CNG. Why seawater is not used? If your answer, sorry, if your question is about shale, then the reason is the salt presence and the impurity presence. It makes it very difficult to use it for any of the industrial processes. So largely that's why you'll see that wherever in the industrial processes water has to be used, it's always fresh water and never salt water, never saline water. Even in coal, when the washing of coal has to happen, even the washing of coal is done with fresh water, and that also leads to a lot of wastage of water. Third point, please tell of disadvantages of HCNG. Disadvantages of HCNG, third steps. Third point, many steps needs to be taken for commercialization at a large scale. See, even if let's say we have the capacity to make HCNG, we'll need a lot of plants. There have to be manufacturing plants all across the country to start producing HCNG. Then after that, you will have to have gas stations like petrol pumps so that you can get HCNG from there. So overall initial investment is too high. So that's why we want to be very sure about how do we want to go ahead with HCNG before we can start working on all these things. Methane also forms carbon after decade. Then why we use methane as fuel? Both of these things have nothing to do with each other, because methane, when it mixes with the atmosphere, it might after a time uh, convert into carbon dioxide, but we can use methane as fuel. So why won't we use it? Do we have to shift from hydrogen to natural gas? Shift? No, we don't have to shift from hydrogen to natural gas. I am not certain what this question really is. Advantages, please explain. So advantages, I mean, there are all these advantages that we discussed, that when it comes to hydrogen, what we understand is that first and foremost, because hydrogen will be more in proportion, so it reduces the emission of carbon monoxide. And then after that, it helps in fuel saving because hydrogen is very efficient. Then after that, it we see that uh, very easily we can calibrate the engines to also reduce the nitrogen oxides as well. Then after that, we see that for heavy duty vehicles or buses also we can use it, and their performance is very good. Shale rock is composed of which mineral? So shale, when it comes to shale gas, largely, I mean, more than 50% of it is just made of clay. And apart from clay, there are other materials. For example, there is quartz also in shale. Then apart from that, there are carbonate minerals also there, which are present in the shale formation. So almost you can say almost 55% is just clay. Almost 30% I believe is uh, quads, and then after that almost 5-6% of feldspar and also of carbonate minerals, etc. All these are mixed in shale. I'm not able to understand which one we have to use, hydrogen or natural gas. It is a mixture. It is hydrogen induced compressed natural gas, meaning that it's a mixture of hydrogen and CNG. Is it basic? Let's done. Shale again. Explain shale gas. So shale gas is nothing but gas. Shale gas is nothing but natural gas, mainly meaning methane, which is trapped in the shale layer, shale rock layer, and we extract these gases from the shale rock. The CNG of hydrogen? No. CNG is compressed natural gas. Natural gas is what? Methane. So methane, you can say that in its form has hydrogen, but you are not mixing hydrogen separately there. Is HCNG useful for trucks used in mountainous regions? It could be, but we have not really tested. Right now, we are public testing it in public transport more than anything. Shale gas is natural gas formed from shale. Does it mean that shale is natural gas and no difference between them? Composition wise, there can be slight differences, but largely they have almost the same composition. Right. So let's move on to renewable energy now. Now, in case of renewable energy, first thing, understand what India is doing. Right now, there are a lot of facts and figures that you will keep coming across with regards to renewable energy. If you look at some of the data that we have in this slide itself, first, India aims to achieve 500 gigawatt of installed renewable energy capacity by 2030. Now, in this 500 gigawatt, there are certain targets that we have. First, we are considering solar energy, then wind energy, then biofuels, and they have been primarily part of our energy mix even today. But apart from that, we are also adding a lot to it. For example, we are adding small hydroelectricity power plants, and we are also adding hydrogen. Rather, let me write green hydrogen. So, as a part of the program that we have, we basically are looking towards all these five different aspects. So, all these together should be able to bring in 500 gigawatt of total installed capacity. Just remember this term also when it comes to installed renewable energy capacity. Installed capacity is a term that we use to signify what's the maximum capacity of a plant. All right, installed capacity. When we say that we are talking about installed capacity is the maximum capacity of a plant. Maximum capacity. That, let's say when we say that it's a 10 megawatt plant, so then it's not necessary that it is producing 10 megawatt of energy. It might be producing lesser than that. All right, but the big thing is that although it might not have the capacity being I mean, it has a maximum capacity of, let's say, 10 gigawatt, sorry, 10 megawatt, but the actual production could have been just 2 megawatt or maybe 3 megawatt because of various external factors. So actual production and installed capacity are two different things. Installed capacity can be very high, and actual capacity or actual production could actually be very low. So that's why installed capacity is the maximum capacity of a plant. So what we want is that our total installed capacity by 2030 should become, plan is that 280 gigawatt should come from solar energy, 140 gigawatt should come from wind energy. So these two, that's why these two are going to be the primary sources, because these two combined directly, they are bringing in 420 gigawatt of power, which is huge. And then apart from that, there are all these other missions also that we have for biofuel, for small hydroelectricity power plant, for green hydrogen, etc. Then another target that we have is that 50% of our electricity generation has to come from non-fossil fuel sources. Now, this is also a term that you need to understand when we say non-fossil fuel. Now, there are slight changes. There are two terms that you have to understand. One is the term that is renewable, and the second term is non-fossil. Do they mean the same thing? What do you think? Do you think both mean the same thing? They don't. Right. Can you tell me why? Or can you give me an example where they are different? What could be the difference between renewable and non-fossil? Yes, Tarun, you are correct. Shalu, you are correct. So let me give you a basic difference. In case of renewable, we are talking about renewable sources of energy: solar energy, wind energy, geothermal energy, biofuels. All these will be counted as renewable energy. But when we say non-fossil, renewable energy becomes a subset of non-fossil for sure. That all these examples that I just gave you, solar, wind, geothermal, and biofuels, they can be counted as non-fossil, but there are others also that will be counted as non-fossil. Example being nuclear energy. One example being nuclear. But then there is another very interesting example. This example one is nuclear energy, and then there is another example, that is large hydroelectricity power plants. Now, what we have done is, if you see that I had kept small hydroelectricity as a part of renewable, but large hydroelectricity power plants as a non-fossil. Can you tell me the reason that why are we considering both separately? What's the basic idea here because of which we are differentiating between small hydroelectricity power plants and large hydroelectricity power plants? Can you just think of a reason? No negative marking for having a wrong answer, but give me an answer. Hmm. So I'll tell you the basic difference. In case of large hydroelectricity power plants, yes, Tarun, you are correct. You have given the correct answer. So in case of large hydroelectricity power plants is where you construct dams, where you construct large dams, right? So when you construct these dams are sources of methane. These large dams, they are sources of methane. Do you know why? Because whenever these dams are being created, in many places you might see that a lot of vegetation will be submerged. All of a sudden you have created a dam, so what happens is that it submerges a part of vegetation that was growing in this particular area. All of it just goes underwater. You will see that sometimes even villages have to be displaced when large hydroelectricity power plants are being constructed somewhere. So that's why what happens is that it submerges a lot of vegetation, and this submergence of vegetation leads to methane production. This leads to methane production ultimately, and that's why we see that large hydroelectricity power plants we do not want to consider as renewable or as a clean source of energy, because it's a source of methane. In case of small hydroelectricity power plants, we try to use running water largely. We try to use running water and smaller plants where the impact on environment is nothing as such. So that's why we consider that as a part of renewable portion. But hydroelectricity, largely we carry it as non-fossil based, and we do not count it as renewable because of methane, because of methane production that happens from here. That's the basic difference. So methane here means that its carbon footprint is higher, carbon emission is higher, and that's why large hydroelectricity comes under non-fossil. So that's why I understand sometimes why I'm explaining all these terms is that sometimes in the newspapers also you will see that they would talk about non-fossil. Sometimes they will say renewable, sometimes they will say non-fossil. So just understand that there is a clear demarcation between what is to be called as renewable and what as non-fossil. Non-fossil, the ones which can in one way or the other have little larger footprint as compared to the other renewable sources. Then apart from that, so all these are the Indian targets, right? Then after that, the emission, carbon emission reduction that world has taken as a target is to be reduced by 45% compared to the 2005 levels. So compared to 2005 levels, 45% reduction in carbon dioxide emission should happen by 2030. And this is again, you can say, a target that the world had kept at as a part of first the Paris Climate Summit and then the summits that happened after that. So 45 reduction compared to 2005 levels. Unfortunately, where we are nowhere close to achieving this, nowhere close. I mean, if anything, compared to the 2019 levels, you will see that the levels of carbon dioxide emission is almost the same, and it actually has increased by 1 or 2%. So we are doing, I mean, the target says 45% reduction and the world has increased its carbon dioxide emission. So we are not really going anywhere. And this is where the we have to understand the value of all this, because of what is also leading to climate change, what is leading to global warming and the effects of global warming that the world already has started witnessing. Whether it is about the extreme weather conditions or the patterns in the climatic conditions that has been changing over time, it all leads to a lot of issues, and ultimately it is going to lead to the destruction of the world. And by having these targets, which, I mean, let's say we had been able to reduce by 20%, 25% on the target of 45%, I would still say that okay, fine, we are trying, but we are not doing good enough. But unfortunately, our emissions have even increased and not decreased. So that's why this becomes a big challenge for the world, because if we do not stop it now, we will be making a permanent change in this entire thing, and then after that you can't come back from there. We'll be making a permanent change in the climatic conditions of the world. Long term goal that India has is net zero emission by 2070. That by 2070, carbon emission in India should be zero. Net zero. That's why we are saying that net zero emissions by 2070. So that's why these are some of the targets and some of the numbers which regard with regards to renewable energy. And rightly so, we understand the value of renewables. We understand that we cannot keep relying on coal and petroleum because of their role in carbon dioxide emission and hence global warming, and plus also a lot of air pollution among other pollution, uh, other kinds of pollution. So that's why we need to understand that there are all these things related to renewable energy. Now, one by one, we shall have a look at the various different types of renewable energy sources that we have. So, first to start with is solar energy. Now, solar energy can be used in various ways. This guy used to use it in very different ways, but unfortunately, we do not have to study about it. We'll discuss about the other ways in which we use solar energy, and this is where we talk about solar thermal and solar photovoltaic. Now, when we say solar thermal, what is the meaning of solar thermal? The term thermal is associated with heat, right? The word thermal is associated with heat. So, overall, the heat that we are getting from the sun, if we are utilizing that heat in one form or the other, then we say that it is solar thermal. And then we have solar photovoltaic. Now, photo is associated with light, and the other term is voltaic. Now, voltaic is associated with electricity. So when we say solar photovoltaic, it means that we want to use solar light from the sun for getting electricity. All right. For getting electricity, we are using light from the sun. So this is something which is called as solar photovoltaic. So in this particular scenario, when it comes to solar photovoltaic, we see that largely what we are trying to use is solar photovoltaic. Right now, the total installed capacity that India has as of November 2023 is 72.3 gigawatt. This is November 2023 data. 72.3 gigawatt is where we are right now. So overall our capacity is huge, and we know, because we also being partly a tropical country, it also means that we have a better capacity with solar energy compared to many of the other nations, many of the other parts of the world. So hence, in that particular scenario, we see that it becomes very crucial that we produce more energy from solar sources. So until now, we are at 72.3. The target that we had for the end of 2022 was 100 gigawatt. We were able to reach up to almost 63.5, 64 gigawatt. And from there on, we have been adding more. There are new schemes, there are new policies, there are various initiatives that are being taken by the government to ensure that they can add to the capacity of solar energy as much as possible. Right now, we stand at 72.3 gigawatt. Now, to use solar photovoltaic, we need to use something called as a solar panel. Now, solar panel, it is something, a device that is used to convert solar energy into electricity. It converts solar energy into electricity, where you have individual cells that are made of semiconductors such as silicon. Now, in this particular scenario, just understand something. We are talking about semiconductors. Now, you have three kinds of materials: conductors, insulators, and semiconductors. Conductors are the ones that will allow the free flow of electricity, right? It will allow free flow of electricity. Insulators, they do not allow the flow of electricity through them. Semiconductors are the ones which, under specific conditions, can allow electricity to flow. So that's why it is called as semiconductor. So now semiconductors become very crucial in terms of the use in solar panels. So solar panels basically will be made of semiconductors. Now overall semiconductor material, that's why these are materials which do not really are completely conductors, or neither completely insulators. So they act as conductors under certain specific conditions. All right. So under some specific conditions, they can act as a conductor. Now understand what's happening here. All right. That why are we not using a conductor, and why do we want to use a semiconductor? Now these semiconductors, they make up the solar cell, and these solar cells together will make up the solar panel. So all these individually, like this or like this, these individually, they are called as solar cells. They are called as solar cells. Now, a solar panel will be made of so many of these solar cells taken together. Now, when it comes to a solar cell, just understand what's happening inside a semiconductor. Now, in this kind of a solar panel or a solar cell made of semiconductors, initially what happens is that all the electrons that you have inside them, they are haphazardly arranged. All right, they are haphazardly arranged like this. When the sunlight strikes, let's say when the sunlight strikes, as soon as the sunlight strikes, what happens is that the same semiconductor or the solar panel now, or the solar cell now, it sees that now all the electrons will get arranged in one single direction like this. Now electrons arranged in a certain direction, it means that now electricity can pass through it, meaning that now flow of charge can happen, and flow of charge would mean that electricity will be produced here. So that is how we make the use of these solar cells, that when sunlight strikes them, they are able to produce electricity, they are able to produce energy, which cannot happen with a conductor. If you have an aluminium conductor or an iron conductor, etc., these conductors, they cannot make the use of solar energy. You will have to find a way in which they will conduct electricity on their own. But in this particular scenario, we see that sunlight will be used to convert these semiconductors into conductors. So that is what happens inside a semiconductor. So, so that's why semiconductor will be useful in making of any solar cell. Now this electricity that is generated here, the flow of charge that now starts to happen, this flow of charge leads to a kind of electricity which is called as direct current. It is called as direct current. Now direct current is the kind of current that can be stored, kind of electricity, electrical power that can be stored. For example, any kind of battery, whether it's a normal AAA or AA batteries that we use, or maybe the batteries that you have in your phones or your laptops, etc. Any battery basically is based on direct current, because direct current is how you store energy. All right, this is how you store energy. Now, this also can be converted into something called as alternating current. Now, for converting direct current into alternating current, we use an inverter. Now I'm sure that you've heard of inverter, correct? You've heard of inverter. Many people use inverters at their homes, and through inverters they are able to uh, provide electricity, get electricity when electricity supply is off, or maybe there is a power cut. So then we use inverter. So what does an inverter do? It has a battery attached to it. The battery will keep getting charged all day long, and as soon as, let's say, power supply is cut, this charged battery will pass through an inverter and convert this stored energy into alternating current that can light up our houses. So in this manner, we see that DC or AC current can be useful. So largely where it is produced, it is direct current, but then it is also converted into alternating current as and when required. Now, another very important instrument that we are using today is a solar pump. Now, in case of solar pump, we know that these are pumps that are useful for agriculture. They are useful for agriculture. They can be used for irrigational purposes. Now, today what we see is that the government of India has been trying very hard to push solar pumps above diesel pumps. Now, what happens here? Just understand this: that there is a scheme that is called as the PM Kusum scheme. We have the PM Kusum scheme. Now, in case of a PM Kusum scheme, what we basically see is that PM Kusum scheme means that this is where we are trying to replace the diesel pumps with solar pumps. All right, we are trying to replace the diesel pumps with solar pumps for irrigation, And also we are looking towards solarization of new areas. We are also looking towards solarization of new areas, meaning that wherever these solar pumps were not present or any kind of irrigation pumping facility was not available, in these kind of areas also we want to start using solar pumps. Now understand the value and the advantage of solar pumps. Why do we want to use solar pumps instead of diesel pumps? There are three advantages. There are three advantages of solar pumps. First is three major advantages. Just understand this. First, for the environment, right? For the environment, simple, that diesel pump is based on diesel, solar pump is made on solar energy, so obviously it's cleaner, so that's why it is environmentally friendly. So that's why this becomes a very important advantage. Second advantage, if you think from the perspective of farmer, the farmer has to keep buying diesel all the time for making irrigation possible. With solar pump, once the solar pump is useful, once the solar pump is charged, they do not really have to spend on a lot of solar pumps. So once it is available, then it is available, and then it can be used for a very long time. The maintenance requirements are very low, and that's why these can be met. So that's why for the farmer also it is helpful, because they do not have to keep spending on this all the time, keep spending on diesel all the time. So that's why cheaper in long term for farmers. All right, cheaper in long term for farmers. Initially, it can be costly. Even here, although as a part of the PM Kusum scheme, what the government is doing is that 75% subsidy is being given on solar pump. 75%. So what it means is that these subsidies being given also means that in a manner there is a financial aid being given to them, right? A financial aid is being given to them. So that's why um, rests, I mean 75% subsidy means that the farmer will have to spend only 25% of the cost, and rest 75% will be shared between the center and the states. So center and the states will share the 75% of the burden, and only 25% will have to be paid by the farmer. So that's why cheaper for farmers in long term. And then for the government also, understand this, that agricultural diesel is also subsidized, meaning that that diesel will be available at a cheaper cost as compared to the petroleum diesel that we just go and buy in the petrol pumps. So compared to that, agricultural diesel is cheaper. So it means that there is subsidy being provided by the government. So for that, I mean, for government also it is not good, because then they're spending more on it. So with these solar pumps, the government also will have uh, an advantage, that no further, no further subsidy on agricultural diesel. So that's why we see that there are all these advantages that solar pumps will have. Now, overall, with regards to solar pumps, we see that there are various different types of solar pumps, either first based on whether it has DC motor or AC motor. So there it is used. Then most important difference between solar pump is all the base on the basis of submersible and surface pumps. So submersible pumps are the pumps where the pump is situated underwater, inside the body of water. So for example, let's say you have a well. So the pump will be kept inside the well and it will be trying to get water from there. So that is what we see, that when the pump is inside the body of water, it is called as submersible pump. On the other hand, we have surface pumps. Surface pumps basically is where the pumps will be installed near the body of water, near some body of water instead of inside. And especially when it comes to running water, largely we see that it is preferred in stagnant water, and this is preferred in running water. Where let's say you have a river, you have a canal, and in all these cases we see that pumping mechanism is better if you provide uh, surface pumps. So that's why these are some of the differences that we have. Another way in which we can classify the pumps is on the basis of centrifugal and positive displacement pumps. Now, centrifugal pump is the pump that is using centrifugal force. All right, it is using centrifugal force. What is centrifugal force? Where you have a circular motion. So, with this circular motion, what happens is that the motor basically will keep on throwing the water outside. There will be a rotator and propeller, and we'll see that it will keep on throwing the water outward with the help of the centrifugal force. And that's why it is called as centrifugal pump, wherever centrifugal force is being used. And then after that, we have the positive displacement pumps. Now, positive displacement pumps work in a manner, you can say it works like an injection. Where what do you see with an injection? That you'll be able, if you pull the injection piston, it creates a pressure difference and water level will start rising in it, or fluid level in general will start rising in it. Something similar is done here, that you have a piston and this piston will be pulled, and as you pull the piston, this is what will make the water level rise and come to the surface. So in this regard, we see that there are centrifugal and positive displacement pumps. So these are all the different types of pumps, and it's all based on what exactly do we want to do, where are we doing the agriculture, and all these things will determine what kind of pump is required. Now, overall, with regards to solar energy, one thing that is very, very important is the National Solar Mission. And this National Solar Mission is something that we had adopted back in 2015. And as a part of it, we said that by 2022, by the end of 2022, we would have a total capacity of 100 gigawatt in solar energy. 100 gigawatt total installed capacity in solar energy. Now, overall, basically, you can say that the objective was to make India a global leader, one of the leading nations with regards to solar energy. And when you look at the growth of solar energy in India, you'll find that we are among the top four nations. We are the fourth fastest growing nation in the world with regards to solar energy. So that's why we see that, and all of this is only because of the kind of support that the government has shown and the kind of initiatives, all the initiatives that have been taken in the field of solar energy. So that's why there are all these various aims that we had taken as a part of the National Solar Mission. Last and most importantly, the fourth point: domestic production of critical raw material, components, and products. Domestic production. Now, as soon as we started to move towards domestic production, a lot of controversies also happened around it, especially the controversy that happened between India and the US, where US had dragged India to WTO, World Trade Organization, stating some kind of issues. So what happened is that India used to import a lot of solar panels. All right, we used to import a lot of solar panels, and then uh, when we adopted the National Solar Mission and we understood that we'll have to hugely scale up the entire production in case of solar energy, this is where we decided that let's not depend on imports of solar panels, but let's start creating it in India, manufacturing it in India. And that's why what we did next was that manufacturing of solar panels was made a part of Make in India campaign. So it now became a part of Make in India. So now we said that we are not going to import it from the US or any other country for that matter, and we are going to domestically manufacture solar panels. Now, in this regard, the entire, you can say, the domestic market of US was highly dependent on Indian imports. And if India does not import, it simply means that there is no need for production, right? If there is no supply, sorry, if there is no demand, there is no need for any supply. And if there is no need for any supply, there is no need for labor. And if there is no need for labor, it means unemployment. So it would increase unemployment in the US, and this is what US has been afraid of. And US simply dragged India to WTO, saying that if India stops procuring solar panels from us, it would simply mean that our domestic market for uh, or the domestic employability in the solar market would drastically take a fall. So that's why this controversy happened. Uh, Overall, although we did see that we uh, continued with it, although uh, we scaled down the total imports that were happening from the US and other countries, and slowly and steadily we started scaling up the production of critical raw material. Read this question. I'm launching the poll also for you. Hmm. So 55% of you have marked the correct answer, which is D. Let me discuss this with you. With reference to solar water pumps, consider the following statements. First is solar power can be used for running surface pumps and not for submersible pumps. This is wrong. We discussed that we can use it for submersible pumps, and solar pumps depends on the water source. So that's why it's not that we can't use it. So that's why statement number one is wrong. Solar power can be used for running centrifugal pumps and not the ones with piston. This is fine. We can use it for running solar centrifugal pumps, not the ones with piston. This is also wrong. The ones with piston are the ones that we call as positive displacement pumps. So that's why this is also wrong. So that's the correct answer here will be neither one nor two. Then after this we have solar trees. Now in case of solar trees, we are talking about a structure where we are making a vertical structure out of solar cells. If you see this, all these solar panels are on a tree like structure, on a vertical structure. Now understand the advantage that we get here. One of the major challenges that we face with solar energy is that you have to horizontally lay down all the solar panels. And many of the times what we see is that we make the use of agricultural fields. We make the use of agricultural fields, and with the help of these fields we are just laying down large plants of solar panels there. So that's wastage of space, that's wastage of land resources, wastage of agricultural resources. So ideally we shouldn't do that. And that is where we see that solar trees can become useful, that the ground can be used easily. It's not that the ground can't be used. and at the same time it is on a raised platform. So that is something that will give an advantage, that it reduces the land requirement in solar energy, becomes viable for both rural and urban areas, addresses the increasing demand for green energy, it is environmentally friendly, and it can also help in increasing the farm income, because the farmers who would allow the use of solar trees in their fields, they will also be compensated for that. So there are all these advantages that the solar trees have. Similarly, there is another technology that we have been trying to use in the recent past, and this is about the floating solar power plants. The floating power plants, as you can see, these are the power plants which we are installing on a body of water, especially on lakes and ponds. This is where we are installing these power plants. Now, installing power plants on water also has some benefits. So, for example, so in case of what we basically see is that they will again help us in efficient use of land resources, that we do not rely on agricultural field or on land for this. Instead, water bodies can be used. Then there are some indirect uh, advantages. One, it can lead to water conservation, because the evaporation rates will now become less, because you have large solar power plant that has been set up over the body of water. So that's where the surface evaporations will decrease, and hence you will be able to maintain a better level of water. Then improved efficiency. Overall, what we have seen is that because there is a cooling effect of water from below, because of this, efficiency increases, because it does not lose out energy in the form of heat. Otherwise, it does lose some energy in heat form. Then it reduces algal growth, because it completely covers these areas. So it also means that there is no photosynthesis that algae can do, and hence it will help in reducing that growth and help in improving the soil, sorry, improving the water quality. Now, overall, just remember that when it comes to solar energy, there are a lot of advantages, and many of these advantages are self explanatory for you. It is renewable, environmentally friendly, wide availability, it's versatile because you can use it in various forms. We discussed this, that we can use it as heat, we can use it as light. Then low noise, because you just install it and after that you will keep getting energy from there without any problem. Maintenance requirements are very low. It can become a remote and portable power solution, meaning that even in remote areas you can install solar plants, nothing stops you from doing that. And even it can become portable options wherever you have let's say available solar energy, you can use it. Return on investment is very high initially because the cost could be high, but over a period of time it has lower return, sorry, it has higher return on investment. Then it helps in increasing energy security. Energy security means what? Less dependence on other countries, less dependence on other countries for energy. And then lastly, evolving technology, because we see that there are still some new innovations that happen, it increases the efficiency. So all these things keep on happening, and this all also leads to a lot of employment generation. It does lead to a lot of employment generation, and even for that there have been schemes. For example, there is the Surya Mitra program. As a part of Surya Mitra program, there is skill development and training that is being done for the people who are graduates, or at least they have crossed their 10 plus 2. In all these scenarios, we see that there is skilling or training for them that is done, and then they become employable in the solar sector. So that's also an advantage of solar energy. Disadvantages: initially it is expensive, it is daylight only solution, you cannot produce solar energy in during night time. It is vulnerable to atmospheric conditions, whether it is cloudy weather or during the entire rainy season. or even air pollution, or even fog situation. So that's why it is weather dependent as well. So there are all these issues. So then whenever you have these conditions, obviously the levels of production will be lower. Then it has a large footprint. We discussed that we have to do horizontal installations. So that's why it has a large footprint. Then there is small manufacturing pollution. Manufacturing pollution meaning whenever you are manufacturing the various components like solar panels, etc., then the pollution that you incur there, although it's very small, cannot be compared to fossil fuels at all, but yet it is a small amount of pollution. And then lastly, electronic waste, because so many solar panels also mean a lot of plastic, a lot of glass, and a lot of semiconductors, and all these things to be disposed of later. So that's also something that we need to look into, because solar energy has just been growing, and only in the last 5 6 years we have seen a tremendous growth in the sector of solar energy. So 10 years from now, or maybe 7 8 years from now, we'll see a lot of wastage being now generated, because all those solar panels of 15 years back would now start becoming ineffective. So then you also have to understand the problem of electronic waste, or what we popularly call as e-waste. So there are e-waste management rules and all these things, but solar energy also has to be taken seriously in that scheme. So this is about solar energy. Before we go on to wind energy, let's take a small break and let's come back on the other side. Meanwhile, if you have any questions, you can also ask those questions, and after the break, I'll take your doubts, and then we shall move forward. It's 4:40. Let's take 10 minutes. Let's come back at 4:50 p.m. Can you show the advantage slide? Low. This is the advantages slide. So we'll be back by 4:50. Welcome back, everyone. What if India denies to import solar panels from India? India did deny. India did say that we are not going to import it anymore and we are going to make it in India. So what happens is that it has a negative impact on the domestic market of the US, because then there is no supply. I mean, there is no demand, so there is no supply, so there is no demand for labor, and hence leads to unemployment. So that's why they were worried. How much targets of renewable energy were completed by India? So targets wise, see the targets, for example, we are talking about the 2022 targets. So the target for solar was 100 gigawatt. The target for wind was 60 gigawatt. Target for biofuels was 10 gigawatt. And the target for small hydroelectricity was 5 gigawatt. Right? So these were the targets, out of which we reached 63.5 gigawatt in case of solar, 42.5 gigawatt in case of wind. We exceeded in case of biofuels, we reached 10.7 gigawatt, and small hydroelectricity was also approximately at the target, 4.9 gigawatt. When the new batches are coming, new batches are going to begin from February, and all the new classes, all the details will be sent to everyone via emails. I'm not sure about it, so I'm sure that support team will help you in that. Is solar pump a part of climate smart agriculture? Yes, it is also included as a part of it. It helps basically in better resource management. By use reading material, I think Tejasvi, the support team will be able to help you with it. I'm not sure. All right. So let's move on to wind energy. Now, wind energy, we are saying that it is a kind of kinetic energy associated with the movement of large masses of air caused by differential heating of the atmosphere by the sun, irregularities on the surface of the earth, and the rotation of the earth. So, these are the three factors that lead to the generation of wind. Now, in case of wind energy, as I told you, the targets that we had was 60 gigawatt for 2022 end, and we had reached up to 42.5 gigawatt, and currently that is November 2023. November 2023 data says that we have reached up to 44.5 gigawatt. Now, overall, when it comes to wind energy and the production of wind energy, we see that the generation of wind energy, first of all, will need a couple of things. One, large open spaces and a very good movement of air. The wind speeds should at least be 15 kilometers per hour. At least it should be 15 kilometers per hour, and then only it will lead to wind generation. Now, when it comes to wind generation, we see that at least 15 kilometers per hour speed is required, and the installations that are done at least 100 meters above ground. At least 100 meters above ground. So these are two things that are kept taken into account whenever we are having any wind energy farm being constructed. Now, in case of India, obviously, when we are talking about large open spaces, these are largely available in the coastal areas. So that's why the coastal states are the top wind producing states in the country. So we start with Tamil Nadu, then we have Gujarat, we have Maharashtra, we have Karnataka, and then we have Rajasthan, where Rajasthan, being a desert state, also has large open spaces available. And then all the others, if you see, they are all coastal states. So that's why all the wind generation is happening from these states. Now, overall, when it comes to wind energy, we know that wind energy is where we are converting kinetic energy into electricity. We are converting kinetic energy into electricity. So kinetic energy to electricity means that this is where the movement of air is being utilized, and ultimately with the help of transformers, etc., we are amplifying it and we are using it to create electricity, or rather generate electricity. Now, overall, when it comes to this, one thing that becomes very, very important in case of wind energy is offshore wind power, because offshore wind power is, you can say, the next thing for wind energy. That is the area where we'll be able to expand our footprint in wind energy altogether. Now, when it comes to wind energy in this particular scenario, we understand that using offshore wind is not easy. Offshore wind, first and foremost, offshore wind, the meaning of offshore wind is that now your construction is not happening on land. It is not just happening in the coastal areas, etc., but it is happening on water. We make the use of continental shelves. All right, we make the use of the continental shelf, and we do all the installations in the continental shelves, because that is where we see that obviously these are wide open spaces, and hence the total, you can say, the ability for us to produce wind energy from these areas will always be better. So that's why we need to understand that this is something that is going to help a lot in going forward. So uh, that's why we have to understand that offshore wind becomes the next big thing in wind energy. But generating energy from wind, generating offshore wind energy is not easy. It's going to take a lot of effort in making that it even possible. So today we do have a national offshore wind energy policy. National offshore wind energy policy. And this national offshore wind energy policy is something that helps us in planning for the future, planning for how exactly can we go about using offshore wind in India. Now, so that's why just understand that offshore wind is when you are doing the construction on the body of water instead of doing it on land. Now, when it comes to offshore wind, we see that as of now, the world capacity 2022 end, we are still waiting for the end of year report of 2023. So capacity was 63.2 gigawatt. Now just imagine that on one hand, India alone in onshore wind energy policy, sorry, onshore wind energy capacity, India has a capacity of almost 45 gigawatt, and the world entirely together has a capacity of only around 63 gigawatt as of today with offshore wind. So obviously, setting up of offshore plants is not an easy job. It's going to take a lot of effort, and that's why we have started working towards making those things possible. So that's why, for example, where we see that India has been trying, especially the coasts of Gujarat and Tamil Nadu, is where we have been trying to identify the potential zones where we can set up wind energy, that is offshore wind energy. We also have been trying to take help from the countries which have already been doing good in this. So, for example, we have been taking help from countries like Denmark. We are working closely with the government of Denmark, and they are helping us in setting up of offshore wind, because they already have a developed offshore wind energy mechanism, and hence they are in a position that they can help from their experience and expertise. So that's why India has been working with the Denmark as well on this. So there are all these things that we are doing. The first pilot project that we have started is off the coast of Gujarat, and this is where the ideas, the learnings from this plant will also make us understand the future course of action and where exactly can we move in the future. Now, looking at the challenges in harnessing offshore wind power, we need to understand that, and as I've been saying, that it's not that easy. Right now, European countries have been largely the ones which have been doing great in case of offshore wind. But going forward, we see that there are other players also entering the market. One of the biggest player here is China. China has been doing a lot in the case of offshore wind, and very soon we might see that it might surpass every European country. And capacity addition that is happening in China in case of offshore wind is huge. And they're not only using their coastal areas, but they are using all the controversial waters as well. They have been setting up these plants even in going in the areas associated with the South China Sea, where there is a lot of controversy around all these nations that belong there. But for China, it doesn't matter. You know that for China, the entire world is China. They have been claiming our borders. They have been claiming the land borders here and there. They claim every country in the world, perhaps, is nothing but China. But they have been doing all these constructions, a lot of these constructions, even in controversial waters, is what I mean. The challenges that we have, first and foremost, it needs a lot of data collection, because you'll have to understand that it's not only about where the setup of the plant is being done. We need to understand what is the kind of flow, how is the flow all year round, is there an issue that we have with the flow. Plus we'll also have to understand the geography of that area. Is that area prone to cyclones? Is that area prone to seismic activities? Can it lead to tsunamis in these areas? Because ultimately, if you set up the plant, you're not setting up the plant for just 1 year or 2 years. You'll have to collect a very solid data to ensure that for the next 15, 20 years, it will not have any negative impact from anything. So that's why it needs a lot of data collection before we can actually move on to setting up of these plants. So that's why a lot of investments requirement is also there. We do see that investment requirements are also there with regards to offshore wind. We have to figure out a way in which, without a loss of lot of energy, we can set up these all plants. So that's why there are all these issues that we need to counter before we can move forward. Then in case of Europe, what we have seen is that there were years of incentives that were given to all the companies in Europe. Such a mechanism is largely absent in India. So that's why there is no such support that we have in India. And for, let's say, when you consider solar energy, there a lot of startups etc also have been coming. For example, there are so many startups that are working in production or manufacturing of solar panels. But in case of offshore wind, we cannot even expect a startup to be built, because the investment requirements are so huge that only a company which is big enough to keep incurring the losses and still stand still, only those kind of companies can do it on their own. Otherwise, other companies will not have that capacity to keep working. So unless it is incentivized by the government of India, unless there is financial support, unless there are subsidies, then only we might see that movement of other companies might also happen. Otherwise it can't. Then production of solar energy right now being so cheap, and onshore wind sector itself not as developed, offshore takes a backseat, because we know that there's a lot of capacity addition still to happen in solar energy, still to happen in wind energy. So in those given circumstances, since we have two sources which we know we can use, which we know how to use in that given circumstance, India may not push for offshore wind as much as it is going to push for solar energy or onshore wind energy. So that's why there are all these challenges that we are facing. Now, coming to the advantages of wind energy, again, most of these advantages are self explanatory: renewable and sustainable, right? Then environmentally friendly. Then it reduces fossil fuel consumption. So that also becomes very, very crucial. And again, wind energy is free, it has a small footprint, it can be used for uh, domestic and industrial installations. It can become a remote power solution. Maintenance requirements are low. Then it increases the energy security, helps in job creation. So most of the points that we discussed in case of uh, solar energy, the same can work in case of wind energy also. Now, looking at some of the disadvantages or some of the limitations that we have in case of wind energy. First, the fluctuation of wind. Now, in case of fluctuation, we know that we need a certain speed. We need, as I told you, 15 kilometers per hour, and then only we can produce that energy. But unfortunately, that may not be the case all the time. Sometimes wind energy or wind speeds might be lower, sometimes higher. So then, in that case, there cannot be a constant supply of energy. Then initial installation especially is expensive. It takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of effort and a lot of money for the installation to happen. But the same thing as what we discussed in case of solar energy as well, that return on investment over a long period of time is very good, that we will be able to do this or use this with very minimum maintenance requirements, and that's why it is functional for a very long time. Then the threat to wildlife. Now, this is a major challenge that we have, that when it comes to the wildlife, look at these two pictures, and this will give you some idea that because of the rotation of the windmills, the rotation of the wind fans, many a times what may happen is that the bird might go and collide with it. And if the bird collides, it can lead to the death of the bird also, which is going to have a negative impact on the ecosystem, negative impact on the biodiversity. So that is one problem. Now, because of this, what we may also see is that these birds may stop moving in these areas, or they might to move to new habitats. They might look for new habitats where they can move and they can survive. So that's not good, because let's say wherever they go, if it's a new environment altogether or a new ecosystem altogether, the food chain or the food web already exists. There must be another bird, there must be uh, 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 another organism or another animal which is occupying the food chain or the trophic level of that food chain that this bird had. So then even if the bird tries to move through that location, it will have a competition with another such animal that exists there, or another bird that exists there. And competition in any ecosystem is never good. It is never good, and it is always going to harm both the species, one probably more than the other, but both the species will be harmed. So that's why there are all these issues that we have. So we need to understand that. Now, this again, there this has been, you can say, you can take it as a case study also, that when we look at, uh, if you see this bird, do you know what this bird is? Yeah, great Indian bustard. This is the great Indian bustard. Now, why I have displayed the picture of this is mainly because there has been a case where we saw that there was a great Indian bustard that died because of electrocution from the high power transmission lines of wind energy. Now, this happened with great Indian bustard. It has happened with other species of birds as well. Now, great Indian bustard is a critically endangered species. All over the world, great Indian bustard is only found in India. It is not even found in other parts of the world. It used to be found once upon a time in Nepal and Pakistan as well, but now there are no uh, numbers that are there in Nepal or Pakistan. So India is the only country in the world where they survive, and that too only in three states: Rajasthan, Gujarat, and Maharashtra. That's it. So their numbers are extremely low. The numbers are going as low as just 150, and in that also, if you are losing these birds, then uh, it becomes extremely difficult for us to even save them from extinction. So that's why there are issues that we need to understand and need to take care of it, because when it comes to uh, wildlife, especially in this particular scenario, there is something which is called as environment impact assessment. Have you heard of it? Environment impact assessment. In, I'm sure that in environment and ecology classes you will read about it. Now, environmental impact assessment is basically when you, before any big infrastructure project is being undertaken, we do an analysis of the area where it is being set up, about the flora and the fauna, what kind of ecosystem persists, is it a sensitive ecosystem or not, can we afford to lose the flora and fauna from these areas or not. So there will be an entire plan that will be made around this kind of a survey and this assessment, and this is called as environment impact assessment. Now in case of environmental impact assessment, what we basically see is that any renewable energy source or any renewable energy power plants are exempted. So any renewable energy power plants are exempted, meaning that they do not have to follow the rules of EIA. So let's say if it's a solar power plant or a wind energy power plant, they do not have to follow this setup of environmental impact assessment. So now this becomes very problematic because uh, the logic that has been given behind it is that these are green sources of energy, these are uh, clean sources of energy. So why do we even need to do an environmental impact assessment? They do have a positive impact on the environment, but then there is this other side of wildlife. So that's why we need to understand from this perspective that there is some disadvantage that uh, wind energy may put forward in this scenario. Then noise pollution. Now in case of noise pollution, what we see is that the constant movement of the wind fans might make it a bit irritating for the people who are living nearby. So that's why the component of noise pollution also has to be understood. Any question if you have here from wind energy? And sorry to interrupt, can you please tell me as to when the prelims test series explanation video will be available? uh, I'm not sure, I'll have to check with the team. uh, the last one I have been told that there has been a delay in setting up of the class for the in the last test, the last PTS that was conducted, but I'm not still sure. I'll check with the team. I'll check with the support team. Territorial species get impacted by wind energy. Uh, I mean, territorial species not directly, but avian species for sure. Explain EIA again. EIA basically, and this is a larger topic for your environment and ecology classes, but EIA is where we do an impact assessment of any infrastructure project that we are about to take. So let's say a hydroelectricity power plant is supposed to be constructed at some place. So before going there, we'll do an analysis that is it feasible for us? Are we going to cause a damage to the environment or not? Are the plants and animals living in these areas, are they going to be impacted? So there are all these assessments that we do, and this is called as environmental impact assessments. How can we mitigate the disadvantages, especially wildlife? Now, the other advantages, more or less, they are natural and they we cannot really do anything about it. Wildlife management is the only thing where we can actually take a step. that before setting up any power plant, any wind energy power plant, we need to understand that area. We need to understand the ecology of that area, and if the ecology of that area gives us an idea, gives us a value to it, then only we should go forward. At least we need to understand that if, let's say, critically endangered bird species are living in these areas, we probably will have to find alternatives to help them. Wind energy and offshore wind energy are the same. I mean, offshore wind energy is when you are setting up in water, and in general we set up on land. Mechanism of offshore wind. Mechanism wise, actually there are a lot of things here, because there are uh, different types of plants. Now, for example, let's say, depending on the depth of water, there are shallow water depths, 30 meters up to 60 meters up to 80 meters. So there are different types of offshore wind plants depending on what is the depth that is there, and usually going beyond that is almost impossible for us to generate or even to support that plant there. So that is basically what we do, that first we try to find out what is the depth that is there, and accordingly the setup will be done. It will be uh, also connected to a turbine, and then there will be transformers, etc., and then underwater the installations will be done. Support email ID, if anyone wants, you can always write to iaslive@byju's.com. Wind energy we don't see everywhere. We don't, mainly because wherever you have good flow of wind, only then you can use it. Now in urban areas you cannot, because there will be a lot of blockages to the flow of air. Similarly, in highly densely forested areas you can't, because there also the trees will block the movement of air. So you have to find areas where the movement of air is good. Wherever you find that, that is where you can do the installations. Offshore means, offshore simply means that when you are doing it off the coast, I mean when you're doing it on water. Footprint basically means how much space is being occupied. So that is what footprint is. So when we say that solar energy has large footprint, it means that it occupies a lot of water, sorry, a lot of space. Whereas in case of wind energy, it has a vertical installation, so does not take up a lot of land. So that is what footprint means. What would be the topic covered for the next class today? I mean, we'll discuss about geothermal energy, and after that biofuels. These are the two topics for today. How Great Indian Bustard gets impacted by wind energy. The installations that were there on the ground, it got electrocuted by one of those mechanisms in the nearby power stations. Let's move on. The next topic for us is geothermal energy. Now, in case of geothermal energy, understand what geothermal energy means. There are two words that you have here, geo and thermal. We already discussed the meaning of the word thermal is heat. Now, geo is associated with the earth. That's why you have geography, where you study about the earth in detail, every aspect of it in detail. So, geothermal energy is when you are getting the heat from the earth, heat from inside the earth, and when we use that heat as a source of energy, it is called as geothermal energy. Now, in all these scenarios, when it comes to the geothermal energy, uh, what we see is that temperature of the earth, obviously, as you go down below, it as we go down below, the temperature of the earth, it will increase. That when you are at the core of the earth, the temperature is approximately at 5000 degrees Celsius, and that is the heat that sometimes can come to the surface, and in one way or the other it finds a way that it can come to the surface. So that heat that somehow escapes to the surface, we try to capture this heat, and this heat that we capture, this is called as the geothermal energy. So that's why heat from when the planet was formed and accreted, the decay of radioactive elements, and decay of radioactive elements also can be one of the ways in which we can lead to the heat escaping out of the earth. Now, in this particular scenario, just understand this, that we'll discuss about what is radioactive element and how heat can be generated from there. But overall, just understand that largely it is the heat that is coming from inside the earth in one form or the other, from one resource or one reservoir or the other. So there can be geysers or boiling mud pots or volcanoes or hot springs, and all of these can be used to get this energy from outside the earth. So that is what becomes geothermal energy. Now, when it comes to geothermal energy, what we see is that there are three ways in which we can get geothermal energy. There are three different types of plants through which we can get geothermal energy. We have dry steam power plants, we have flash steam power plants, and we have binary cycle plants. So these are the three types of power plants that can be used to get geothermal energy. Now, one by one, we'll try to understand these plants and also a significance that these plants have. One is dry steam power plant. Now, in case of dry steam power plant, what we do is that this is something that works by piping hot steam from underground reservoirs directly into the turbines from geothermal reservoirs. Now, understand what's happening here. You have the reservoir here, all right? We have the reservoir here. Basically, this is where you have the heat of the earth. You have the heat from inside the earth. Now, this heat from inside the earth is in the form of steam, for example. So now this steam escapes from there, and steam will be taken to the turbine. The steam will be taken to the turbine, and as it reaches the turbine, it will lead to the rotation of the turbines. And after that, you'll take it back from here, and it will be sent back to the reservoir. And in this manner, we'll see that it will keep on circulating. It will keep on circulating like this. So this is a dry steam power plant where steam is taken to the turbine, leads to the rotation of the turbine. Rotation of the turbine will produce electricity. Then after that, the water loses heat, the steam loses heat but becomes water. Then from there on, again it goes back to the reservoir. It comes in contact with the heat of the reservoir, again gets heated up, converts into steam, goes back to the turbine. So in this manner, there is this cycle that we continue, and this is called as dry steam power plant. And this is where we are making the use of the energy from inside the earth for our requirement. The second kind of plant is called as flash steam power plant. Now, in case of flash steam power plant, the name that has been given is mainly because there is this part which is called as the flash tank. This part is called as the flash tank. Now, this flash tank is something that is at normal temperature and pressure. What we do in flash steam power plant is that we maintain high pressure in these pipes. We maintain high pressure here. All right. We maintain high pressure. So when it is coming out of the reservoir, so you have the reservoir again here. Reservoir meaning the source of the heat. It could be, let's say, something like uh, a geyser or a hot spring or even a volcano. So from there on, what happens is that the steam that is coming here, now we keep it at high pressure. So what happens is that it will, at high pressure, just remember one thing, that when you are at high pressure, water can remain liquid even at high temperature. Meaning, normally what happens that at 100 degrees Celsius, water will boil into steam, right? Water will convert into steam at 100 degrees Celsius. But in case, let's say you have a temperature, sorry, you have very high pressure, then at high pressure, even if you are at 150 degrees Celsius, water can still remain in its liquid form, right? Water can still remain in its liquid form, and without converting into steam, it can still function. It can still function, or it can still carry all the heat. So what happens here is, in case of flash steam power plant, that all the heat that is coming from the reservoir, it is in its liquid form until it reaches the flash tank, because at the flash tank you have normal pressure. So as soon as you come from high pressure to normal pressure, or high pressure to low pressure, the water quickly converts into steam, because until now you maintained high pressure to ensure that water remains in its liquid form, and while piping out all the heat. But as soon as it comes to this flash tank, it completely converts into steam. It is said to be flashing into steam. It flashes into steam. It quickly converts into steam, and then this steam again will go to the turbine, and again it will cause the rotation of the turbine. It loses heat here, again a condenser will be used, and with the help of this condenser, it goes back to the reservoir. So in this manner, there will be this cycle that we continue, the same cycle with one change, that we maintained high pressure to ensure that water in its liquid state can carry more heat to the turbine. And that's why in case of flash steam power plant, it is able to generate more energy. It is better in its efficiency as compared to dry steam power plant. So that's why just remember that it is more efficient, more efficient than dry steam power plant. Now, another one that comes, another example that is very important, is the third kind of plant called as binary cycle plant. Now in case of binary cycle plants, the main difference is that water or steam from below the earth never comes in direct contact with the turbines. So what happens, again you have the reservoir here. Now we are saying that it is binary cycle plant. What is the meaning of binary? Where do you use the word binary? Quickly, somebody can tell me, please. Yeah, two, correct. So wherever you have two things, you will say that it is binary. So why two here? Because there are two parallel cycles running. Until now, we saw that there was only one cycle that was running and going to the turbine. Here we have two independent cycles. First cycle is of the steam. First cycle is of the steam that is going into the turbine. Sorry, that is going out of the reservoir. So this is the first cycle that we are running with. Now what happens is that this cycle, this steam comes in contact with the second liquid. It comes in contact with the second liquid, and this second liquid is largely an organic liquid, like isobutene, or even pentane, etc. is used. So so largely what we see is that organic liquids with lower boiling point will be used. Organic liquid with lower boiling point. So these are liquids that will have boiling points of 40 degrees Celsius, 50 degrees Celsius, 60 degrees Celsius, which is pretty less as compared to water, which boils at 100 degrees Celsius. So what now happens is that this thing that is coming, this steam that is coming out of the reservoir, it comes in contact with the second organic liquid, and this organic liquid will quickly convert into its steam form. The organic liquid will convert into its steam form, and then it will go to the turbine, lead to the rotation of the turbines, and hence from there on we see that we get energy. And then that's why there are two parallel cycles that are running at the same time in case of binary cycle plants. Now, binary cycle plants, one thing is for sure that they have very good efficiency, no doubt about that. But binary cycle plants, interestingly, are very important from another perspective. There was a report that was published by IPCC. A couple of years back, this report came out, published by IPCC. Do you know what is IPCC? Can you tell me the full form and the role of IPCC? This is not given in the book. So fine, it's not given in the book. How does it matter? I told you that just focus on the classroom and focus on current affairs. Please remember, I have told this already 4 or 5 times in this classroom. Please don't go beyond this class. Science and technology as a subject is a very different subject compared to most of the other subjects that we're learning. Please focus on what we are doing in the classroom. That will solve your problem. And after that, just read on current affairs, add current affairs to whatever we are doing. No need to go to any resource beyond this. Yeah, Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. Perfect. But what exactly is it related to? What does this IPCC do? Scientific assessment, correct. Scientific study related to what? Related to climate change. Perfect. So now, we wouldn't say study, because they take studies that have been done by various people, various organizations, etc., and they assess those studies and compile a comprehensive report on climate change. So there are assessment reports that are published by IPCC where they talk about climate change, because and these assessment reports are very big, bulky reports that they publish every 6, 7, 8 years. So, for example, the fourth assessment report came in 2010, then fifth assessment report came in 2014, and then sixth assessment report came in 2022. So that's why it takes a long time for them to even create these reports, and they come out with a very comprehensive report for the entire world with regards to climate change. Now, IPCC had uh, published a special report, and this report was based on uh, all the different types of renewable energy sources. And what IPCC said is that binary cycle plants are the cleanest. Binary cycle plants are the cleanest among all the renewable sources, all the renewable energy resources. So just imagine that it is saying that even compared to solar energy or wind energy or biofuels or the other types of plants like dry steam power plants or or flash steam power plants, compared to all of them, binary cycle plants are the cleanest source of renewable energy. That is why they take a center stage. That is why they have an importance, because of uh, this particular report that was published by IPCC. If you look at the Indian assessment of geothermal energy, right now what we see is that these are some of the areas as marked in the map. These are some of the areas where we have found sources or possibilities of geothermal energy in India. So ONGC, for example, is mapping India's 10 gigawatt geothermal energy potential. Overall, if you look at some of the developments that have been happening in the country, we know that the total potential that we have with geothermal energy is approximately 10 gigawatt. A total of 340 geothermal hot springs in the country have been identified by the Geological Survey of India. And all these areas, as we saw in the map, these are the areas where we can uh, get all the geothermal energy from. Then there are certain small developments that we have seen. For example, ONGC had signed an MOU with Ladakh to establish India's first geothermal plant, and this is happening in the Puga Valley. It is happening in the Puga Valley in Ladakh. This is where the plant is being set up. Puga Valley is well known for its hot springs, etc., and this is where they will try to generate energy from. Then apart from that, we see that there is Geothermal Core of Texas that has signed a letter of intent to invest rupees 820 crores in geothermal energy production in the state of Uttar Pradesh. Similarly, there are some other international private companies which are also entering India. For example, there is a company called as Reykjavik Global, which a few years back also started coming to India and started setting up some plants. I think Chhattisgarh and Andhra Pradesh were two regions that they were looking towards. So that's why we see that there are all these some of these are some of the developments that we see in the field of geothermal energy, and we believe that we'll be able to generate some. Right now we do not really have a target set as such, as we discussed for solar energy or for wind energy. There are no targets for geothermal energy. We are in a very nascent stage. We are trying to understand how exactly can we make the use of geothermal energy. For example, the Puga Valley case is where they will try to develop a 2 megawatt plant. They might develop a 2 megawatt plant there, and this 2 megawatt plant will help in fulfilling the local requirements. They will help in fulfilling the local requirements of that area, because these are areas where they are dependent only on solar energy, and electricity supply there is not that great. So that is where we'll see that all these will help them. Advantages, again, it is renewable and sustainable, environmentally friendly, constant supply. Now this is where they take an advantage over solar or wind energy, because in both the cases we discussed that a constant supply of energy is not possible in them. It has a small footprint because the installations are largely done underground, and anyway the installations are not done in agricultural fields, because they will be done in areas wherever you have hot springs or geysers, etc., and those areas anyway are not suitable for agriculture. So that's why it's not that you are setting them up in agricultural lands. Then they are cost effective, low maintenance requirements, low noise, reduces fossil fuel dependency and increases energy security, leads to a lot of job creation potentially, and obviously has a huge potential. And we are just about to, we are beginning with the understanding of geothermal energy. Some issues: first, it has geographical limitations. It's not that you will be able to generate geothermal energy anywhere. Only the places that have hot springs or geysers or volcanoes, etc., only these are the places which are uh, having a source of geothermal energy. Geographical, that's why geographical limitations. Largely you will see along the fracture lines, along the tectonic lines, these are the areas where potential of geothermal energy is higher. That's why India also, you see that the Himalayan belt, starting from right from Ladakh and going from let's say Himachal Pradesh to Uttarakhand, and then on the other side of Assam and Arunachal Pradesh, etc., these are the areas, or even Sikkim for that matter, these are the areas where we have higher geothermal potential. Then last, large investments are required to understand these areas, whether commercial viability is there or not. Are these so small sources that we cannot commercially get energy out of them? Then there are environmental impacts that we have to understand, or potential environmental impacts. For example, chances of hydrogen sulfide gas being emitted from these areas. So that's why we have to know this. Then there are sustainability concerns, that whether or not the sources being used, are they sustainable sources, will they be here with us for long durations, long time or not. And then there are chances of even seismic instability. Seismic instability meaning that there are chances that it might lead to earthquakes. Now, there have been a couple of cases. There was one case in Basel in Switzerland, and then there was one case in the US as well. We see that in these cases, there was small earthquake. On Richter scale, it would have been just 3.7, 3.8. But when they looked into the epicenter of this earthquake, they found that the epicenter was a geothermal energy power plant. So it is potentially possible that the instability would have been caused by the geothermal energy power plant. So that's why we need to understand the importance of this also. So before we go on to bioenergy, let's take our break here. If you have any question, please let me know. If you have any questions that you want to ask from here. When steam is ejected back, is it ejected in gaseous or liquid form? Can you specify in what context are you talking about? Flash steam. Okay. So in case of flash steam, see, the one that goes back in its liquid form, and the one that you are bringing to the flash tank, that also is in the liquid state. Only as you reach flash tank, that is where you have the steam form which goes to the turbine. After turbine, there is a condenser, and condenser again converts this steam into the liquid form. Geothermal energy plant in India, there are a few. For example, in Chhattisgarh, in Andhra Pradesh, in Ladakh, in all these areas, there have been some plants that we are working on. Is science and technology also important for beans? Of course, it is. There are 3 to 4 questions every year coming from here. Binary cycle plant, just know that there are two cycles that are parallelly running. One cycle of water and steam, and the other cycle of an organic liquid like isobutene, pentene, pentane, etc. So there will be a heat exchange that will happen, that as the steam comes in contact with the second liquid, it will heat up the second liquid, which converts into steam and goes to the turbine. In India, do we have binary cycle plants? No, we don't have binary cycle plants in India. Fourth point of geothermal disadvantage: sustainability concern basically is about, sometimes the source that we want to derive energy from, they may not be very strong sources, so they may not be sustainable for long, because then you will have to wait for them to replenish and then use them again. ONGC is Oil and Natural Gas Corporation, looks after various petroleum and natural gas related aspects, plus all these kind of sources of energy also. In all the three types of steam plants, ejected steam is in liquid form? No. In case of flash steam, it is liquid. In dry steam and in binary cycle plants, it is in steam phase. Hmm. So let's take a break here, and I think part three of your session will start after this break. So right now the time is 5:48 p.m. So let's be back by 6:10.